Now, the Venezuelan opposition leader, Edmundo Gonzalez, has vowed to continue the fight for democracy after being granted asylum in Spain. He fled Venezuela on Sunday after weeks in hiding amid political turmoil over the July election result. Both Gonzalez and the incumbent president, Nicolas Maduro, claimed they won the election, and Gonzalez was placed under an arrest warrant for a range of alleged crimes and faced the prospect of decades in prison if he had remained in Venezuela. Nick Rushworth has this report.
The Venezuelan opposition presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez arrived in Spain seeking asylum amid a political and diplomatic crisis over Venezuela's disputed July election. Supporters gathered at the military base in Madrid where his plane landed and expressed relief that he was safe.
Whoever is in danger under Nicolas Maduro's regime should be safer here and can maintain their strategy from here.
They forced him to flee. This only confirms that Venezuela is a dictatorship that's impossible to live in. If you don't agree with the regime, you have to leave or you might get killed.
Gonzalez arrived after Caracas granted safe passage. His surprise departure came just days after Maduro's government ordered his arrest.
The governments of Spain and Venezuela agreed on providing a safe conduct to citizen Edmundo Gonzalez, so he could abandon national territory and he could receive the asylum granted by Spain.
The Spanish foreign minister says there were no talks on Gonzalez's exile.
There has not been any kind of political negotiation between the government of Spain and the government of Venezuela. The political asylum has been at the personal request of Edmundo Gonzalez.
Venezuela's opposition says July's election resulted in a resounding win for Gonzalez and published vote tallies online to show that. Nicolas Maduro, now into his third term as president, has dismissed that and says there was a right-wing plot to sabotage his government. The US, EU and various foreign governments say they won't accept his win until he releases proof that he got most votes.
And I'm pleased now to be joined live on the programme by Christopher Sabatini. He's a senior research fellow for Latin America at Chatham House. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
What options does Gonzalez have now that he's safely out of Venezuela?
Well, he has the option of being free, of not having to worry about being jailed for competing in what was supposed to be an international guaranteed and democratic election, which clearly the government, by all accounts, including an evaluation of the 25,000 vote polls, tabulations, or actas as they're called in Venezuela, proved that he had won. So now he doesn't have to serve jail time. So that's a good thing, of course. But right now it does diminish his leadership in Venezuela, and you can tell from the report that you had before when Alex Saab was kind of poking him a little bit for leaving the country, although they had forced him to leave. So his departure is very much in the interest of the Maduro regime. Having said that, Gonzalez can now, as a former diplomat, can now travel to other countries to try to rally support as effectively the president-elect of Venezuela in European capitals, in Brazil, in Colombia, in the United States. So it will help to build more of an international momentum. And by the same token, the person who he was standing in for, Maria Corina Machado, remains in Venezuela, and she'll remain a very powerful figure within domestic politics. And that is her there to the left of Edmundo Gonzalez in the photo.
Right, well, let's talk a little bit then about the remaining members of the Venezuelan opposition who are still in the country. You just mentioned one of those big names there. How weakened is the opposition by the fact that Gonzalez is out of the country?
It's weakened in many ways. Having the effective president-elect out of the country does definitely diminish his stature within domestic politics. But also it strengthens in some ways as a symbol. It demonstrates the very sheer cruelty and brutality of this regime that forced him to flee under broad allegations of terrorism that included basically falsifying government documents as well as trying to incite rebellion. It demonstrates this is a regime that will brook no criticism domestically or internationally. And it demonstrates, again, the complete facade of an election that they held on July 28th. So it's an important symbolic moment. Over the long term, it may very well hurt the opposition because he's not in the country. But to be quite frank, this is a 75-year-old man who ran as a stand-in for his country. It's completely understandable that he had to leave given the charges and the witch hunt against him.
And in terms of diplomatic support now, Gonzalez, obviously in Spain, I imagine meeting with members of the Spanish government. What kinds of support is he getting from allies in Spain, also in places like the United States? And is it enough?
He's getting support, broadly speaking, in European capitals and really across the Western Hemisphere. Josep Borrell, basically the foreign secretary of the EU, yesterday denounced the exile, the asylum, and effectively declared Edmundo Gonzalez as the legitimate winner of the elections. Tony Blinken in the United States, the Secretary of State, did the same. So I think this will solidify in many ways their personal relationship with him and demonstrates that he has their support. The question really is for the international community is what comes next. They've been questioning these results. They've been demanding the actas, as you can see right there in the photo, the polling, poll-by-poll results that the government refuses to release. And the government has not released them. And so what is the international community going to do next? Hopefully this will solidify some sort of coordinated action that involves both negotiations, but also the threat of individual sanctions against many in the regime who are guilty of what clearly is a fraud.
Do you think Nicolas Maduro is likely now to serve this full 6-year term in office?
Honestly, I find that hard to believe. This has been said before, but given the level of repression, given the level of international condemnation, given the fact that the economy has shrunk by 2/3 in the last 8 or so years, and more than almost 8 million people have fled, it's difficult to imagine how this can persist. But of course, Nicolas Maduro has defied expectations before. I think, again, the cruelty of this government is certainly a shock to the world over. And so its willingness to cling on to power is really, is unprecedented. So he could very well survive. But 6 years is a long time. International isolation is a long time. And people are quite frankly fed up, as we've seen from the demonstrations since the July 28th elections.
Christopher Sabatini, great to get your view on all of this. Thank you very much indeed.